Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Least of These podcast. I'm your host, Janai Jackson. And like always, our goal is to, discuss the deep theological truths and kind of break it down so that the everyday man can understand it. You can find the Least of These podcasts on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you may be listening to your podcast episodes. That's where you can find it. So today, in this episode, we're going to be talking about eschatology, right? And I know this topic can be, kind of dense for some and kind of controversial for others. What I want to do in this episode is kind of take out the hoopla, right, that surrounds this topic and kind of just establish a framework so that we can understand it and so that we can really discuss it with each other, right? Understanding exactly what eschatology is and what that looks like. So before we even get into the conversation, I want to quickly just kind of introduce one of my good friends and the guest on this episode, Mitchell Haddix. So what's up, Mitch?
All
How
right.
you doing?
I'm doing good. Just not much, really. Just, another morning. Well, afternoon now. So, yeah, what we've been friends for what?
About,
Going on 4 years now?
yeah, three, 4 years.
Yeah. Met at work. Kept saying hi to you all the time. Annoyed you.
So, Mitch, tell us a little bit more about yourself, right? Who is Mitch? What do you do?
Oh, well, mostly, probably the best way to describe it is either if I'm not working and if I'm not relaxing, I'm probably reading some theological book or some other fictional book because at the end of the day, that's kind of what I like to do. And but I really just enjoy exploring, just about everything really. Man, years ago, it would be weird for me to say that like I'm gonna go read about the doctrine of justification or something.
Mm-hmm.
If I told my 17-year-old self as that you're gonna be doing that, I'd probably laugh and be like, "What was the point?" My life now compared to when I was a teenager is very different, and it's a lot more. I think it's a lot more theologically rich, but also a lot more just personally rich with relationship to God and Jesus and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. And your love for reading really didn't start, in the last 3 years. So it kind of started when you were
I was like 8.
because you got your degree in what?
English.
Yeah,
So,
English.
So I started reading. I was a sport kid when I was young.
Mhm.
When I was just itty bitty, basically. But then eventually I got tired of sports and did a total
180.
180 and just got into reading. Read a bunch of fictional stories. I still love fiction, but these past couple of years, it's mostly spent a lot of nonfiction, which I think is okay, but it's good and I'm enjoying it. But I also I do need to get back into some fictional reading as well. But I kind of get that that taste for it from also writing because I also write a lot.
Yeah.
And so I've written a couple books. So
Yeah, I was about to say you did write a couple books. I would have had it in this episode if I kind of remembered because I actually have one in my bookshelf, and I'll have the link to it if y'all want to purchase and kind of read Mitch's book. But your book was called Memento, right?
yeah, Memento. Yeah.
Yeah, Memento.
Yeah, so I wrote it my first year in college. So I wrote it in about 8 months, basically. And then we moved here, which is really funny because I based the book, the setting for it is here in Norfolk.
Ooh.
And we ended up moving here about like the end of that semester. I was told that we're going to move here. And I'm like, where is Virginia Beach at? And it'll be right next to Norfolk because I had no idea
Right.
about the lovely 7 cities and all that kind of stuff. So it's just interesting to be living in a place where I wrote about. So
Yeah. That's cool. So, I know, speaking of eschatology, a lot of people are probably wondering, why is Mitch, talking about eschatology, or why Mitch as a guest? Well, it actually started, it's actually the funniest story in my life. We were actually working together, and I remember, we was discussing eschatology just out of the blue, and I was like, hey, Mitch, have you ever talked about eschatology?
yeah, it became the topic of the day.
And your view was, I think it was, it's all going to pan out in the end kind of view.
Yeah, I think most of it was I could talk about some things, but I'm like, I don't want to really get into a whole lot of details because, in reality, this study of eschatology that I'm still doing, but I feel much more footed and have a much firmer foundation in it than I used to. It's been going for about 10 years now, I would say, because I think it was about when I was like 12, 13. I'm 24 now, so yeah, just through my lovely sanctification process, God's brought me to it, and then I've gotten frustrated, and I'm like, I can't understand it, and I just kind of left it alone, and they kept bringing it back, and it's really, I think it's come full circle now because of getting into Reformed theology and really actually really trying to be biblical about things, and reading the Bible biblically, and really understanding that there's a context, there's an author who had a point for what he was writing about. And also the fact that all of Scripture is connected with each other.
Yeah,
it's the Bible is a collection of 66 books. All of them interplay with each other. They have here's the thing: the apostles quote from the Psalms constantly. They quote from Isaiah. They quote from even Genesis. Like they even quote outside of the canonical books. So like Paul uses a quote from a famous philosopher when he was talking to the philosophers on Mars Hill. So.
Yeah. So going back to the night, I mean the day where we was talking about it, and I was like, "Hey, have you thought about this topic?" It's like, "Yeah." Next one, he was kind of dismissive.
Yeah,
and like Mitch, only what Mitch do. I don't know what happened.
Well, you talk to me, then I come back like the next day.
Yeah, he was like,
"Okay, I studied up on it. Yeah.
I got 3 books on it, and I'm just like head down into it." And so you took eschatology further than I ever would have, because I was just like, I just wanted to talk a little bit.
Well, yeah. Well, I think the common joke with, where I said it was going to all pan out in the end, it was like, when it comes to the different like millennial views and that kind of stuff, and you really get into the weeds of it, there's the pan-millennialist, which is like the idea of like, it'll all pan out in the end.
Yeah.
It's a really bad, crude joke. And some other, some theological teachers probably don't like it. So, but it's kind of where do you, if you don't really have a specific focal or landing point, it's kind of like I don't really have a whole lot to say.
But you know what, that I think it is by God's providence that, that conversation really got under your skin and really lit a fire for you to like get, I don't even know how many books of Revelation.
To be honest, I think this happens with all of our conversations, because you did the same thing when it came to election. So I bet that you lit a fire underneath my you lit a fire in my bones for that too.
Yeah.
So
we got to tell you the story about that a little bit later, maybe when we talk about election, because that's actually hilarious. The one thing that I want to kind of discuss, though, or really want my audience to understand, is that, Mitch is not just a regular guy on this topic. He has done much studying, so much so that probably by the end of this year, he's probably going to have a very thick book that, I may or may not read on Revelation.
I'm just going to hand it to you and you'd be like, why?
Yeah, that's how much he's kind of, studied on this topic. So Mitch is going to help us out really to understand this topic in a little bit more detail, really remove all of those dense, aspects of this conversation, all these triggering parts of this conversation, so that you can really get a good understanding of it. So the first question I have, really like almost 10 minutes into the video, the first question I have is, what is eschatology? For the people who don't know, what is eschatology?
Well, just be most simple about it. Eschatology is a lovely Greek word meaning last things. So it's a study of the last things, or end times, as we would properly say in Christian evangelism.
Yeah.
So,
all right. And then in the follow-up to that one is, why is it important for maybe somebody who's, not even thinking about this issue at all? Like, why should they care about eschatology? Why shouldn't they be someone who's what's the term, to pan-millennialist?
Yeah,
right. Where it's like, I mean, it's all going to pan out. Why shouldn't they be?
Probably the biggest reason why we should care is because it's in the Bible. It's taught, and you can find it in the scriptures, and it's but also because of the just in the nature of eschatology, the nature of it is the last things. It's literally the end of the book. It's basically discussing the final things about, well, of course, we're talking about Christian eschatology, so it's dealing with, like, the second coming of Christ, the final judgment, the eternal state where the new heavens and new earth is fully consummated in its completion, and we're just, of course, we don't have any record or document or told like what's exactly going to happen when we're in that state. We're just kind of like, we're just going to be there. So eschatology is about that, and it is in the scriptures, and and of course in the book of Revelation also speaks to that as well, just as other parts of scripture does as well. So it's important for the fact of that it's in your religion, it's in your faith. So it would probably be a bad thing to not at least get some form of a handling on it to some degree.
And I would probably even add that how you understand the last days, or how you understand eschatology, kind of influences how you understand the present, right?
Oh yeah.
So like if you have a very bleak, a very dark kind of eschatology, it's all going to blow up in X, Y, and Z. You're probably more apt to take I don't really care what happens on this world kind of point of view.
It kind of takes the Christian out of the world, which is, and if you read Jesus' high priestly prayer in John, he literally says not for that to happen. He's to keep us in the world, but to keep us from the evil one, to keep us from evil. But it's also that's the thing about it is that probably about 50, 60 years now, the Christian church has been influenced heavily by a very defeatist eschatology, and the idea of the fact that the world's just going to get worse and worse and worse, and then Jesus has to when he comes back, he'll save us, kind of thing. And that's not really what Scripture talks about, especially when Jesus says, "On this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell will not withstand against it." It's like gates are a defensive
mechanism.
Defensive mechanism.
Got you. So, and I think what you're kind of alluding to is some of those other eschatological views that we're going to be talking about a little bit later. For those who don't know, we're going to be having, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 of this kind of conversation, because, oh my goodness, there's so many different layers to eschatology where it's like,
weeds, it gets bad.
I remember Mitch, him coming to me one day, it was like, oh, this part of eschatology. And then he comes in another thing, and I'm just like, Mitch, how many layers, guy? Right?
It's an onion. It's a beautifully formed, glorious onion.
And we're going to help you understand that onion, right? So, all right. So I know that and for those who don't know, there's a lot of eschatological views out there, right?
Yeah.
But help us understand what makes an eschatology a bad eschatology, right? So, if there's a lot of views out there and stuff like that, and we don't want to fully, demonize or ostracize someone who may differ from us in terms of how they view the end times and stuff like that, but there is some views where it's like,
I think where we get into that is it's more where we get outside of Christianity, because at the end of the day, when it comes to Christian eschatology, it's a secondary issue. It doesn't your belief and your standing on eschatology doesn't save you. It's not the gospel. It's part of the gospel, but it's not the gospel. It's basically not your salvation.
Yeah.
So it's a conversation to be had, and just like our sanctification, it's going to probably take a lifetime to fully come to complete understanding.
Right.
And so when it comes to bad eschatology, it comes more out of so you have different religions, because let's be honest, every belief, every religion, even if you're an atheist, I'm sorry, it's still a religion. You still have some form of a belief. You have an eschatology.
Yeah.
It's about how the world pans out in the end. For the atheist, it's just, benign neglect, maybe.
Yeah.
For, if you're a Richard Dawkins, it's benign neglect. For others, you can still be a hopeful atheist and be like, we have all this technology. Maybe we can advance our technology to be like, Elon Musk wants to put people on Mars, that kind of thing. But when it comes to Christianity, there's a good 3 to 4 eschatological views that are basically on the playing field. It's like, but if you hold either one, you're not we're not going to brand you a heretic and excommunicate you and disown fellowship. No, that's the wrong thing to do. The better thing to do is actually, come, let us reason together and go over the scriptures together. That's the more important thing. I think that's the more God honoring thing to do. But when it comes to bad eschatology is where we like find cults and weird ideas such as you have Mormonism.
Yeah.
That's another. That's one.
Which is not Christianity, by the way,
It's
right?
not. For a while, they actually they wanted to be called Christians, but I think now they really don't want to be called Christians. They've kind of flip flopped on the term Mormon, Latter Day Saint, or Christian. At the end of the day, we just call them LDS, which is the Latter Day Saints, because but they do call themselves the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter Day Saints.
Yeah.
So LDS.
Everything but, though.
Yeah, everything but. No. And then, of course, and then we have Jehovah's Witnesses, which is probably, we're dealing, the reason I say those two in particular is because you're more, it's the more bigger Christian, in quotation, cults around and ideas that you're going to run into. Because, of course, we all know, we've all had that, well, if you haven't, God bless you. If you haven't had the Jehovah's Witnesses come knocking on your door, but early in the morning, and you're like, who?
with the newspaper.
With the newspaper, it's like Armageddon is coming.
I'm interested to read one of those.
But that's the main point about these is that these cults came out of what we call the Restoration movement. It's a historical movement. It's a Christian movement too. But the problem is with the Restoration movement was these churches came together. It was basically they wanted to combat denominations,
right?
Which ironically, because of what they taught and what they decided to do, it sparked all these denominations. Because at the time, I think Protestantism had like maybe 5 main denominations at this time, and then of course you had Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, and then of course there's differing little groups in theirs too. But like our major cults such as Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and there's a couple other ones because the Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses branched off into different things. You have the LNG, you have the Millerites, LNG White, and then of course, again, I'm not just going to brand everything a cult either, but you have to understand the history of what these groups come out of, like Seventh-day Adventism that comes out of the Millerites. It's a group that splintered off from them. That's another thing. I don't think there can't be certain Christians in those groups.
Yeah,
but Christ will will bring his sheep out of those places.
And to add a little bit more nuance to, because I know you mentioned 7-day Adventism and stuff like that. I know there's a lot of debate, mainly because there's so much differing views within 7-day Adventism, where whenever you're trying to talk about what is 7-day Adventism and stuff like that, there's so many people's like, oh no, that's not what we believe, and then the other person's like, no, it actually is what we believe, and the other person is like, no, you're both wrong. This is what we believe. And so I don't fully know if 7-day Adventism fully understands what 7-day Adventism is, but they do have a common theme in that the LNG White, how she came about her prophetic, stuff like that.
All of these views either come down to predicting the end of everything, such as Jehovah's Witnesses have predicted Armageddon, I don't know how many times. And
even though there's a scripture that says no man knows the day and the hour.
Yeah. But that's never stopped anyone.
No.
But and then it's another thing. LNG White, that was another thing that started that with the Millerites. That was another. I think the more popular, you probably like the jargon would be Doomsday cult, basically, where they kind of just like, the end is nigh and all that kind of stuff. And there's another out of the and it's funny because all of the stuff came out of the Restoration movement. All of it came out of the late 1800s. Part of you is like, what happened during the 1800s? But I think part of it may be because of the overall motive in the Restoration movement was about getting back to that apostolic church and the apostolic stuff. But at the end of the day, they also thought that creeds and confessions were bad, and they wanted to get away from it. So they lost all of church history.
Yeah,
and all of our giants in the faith that we stood on their shoulders for so long, and we just decided like, no, we're just going to jump off and plant both our feet in midair. Yeah, like so we run into a lot of issues like that.
I know 7-day Adventism, they're really against creeds and stuff like that. They're like, nope, we're all Bible. But ironically, they have, I think, 28 fundamental beliefs, which kind of like their creeds.
The idea of saying all creeds are bad is a creed in of itself. You're basically making a line in the sand, and you're making some type of profession of something.
Yeah.
So that's a creed or a confession.
Yeah.
So it's kind of backwards. It's kind of funny.
Which that got to be a different conversation of why creeds and confessions, why that's important.
Yeah.
Although I would make the distinction that they do believe in having a systematic kind of theology, but they make sure they're careful not to label it as a creed and stuff like that. It's a whole.
They're less systematic about it.
Yeah,
they don't really believe in that really type of rich ecclesiology, which of course, and then of course you got Roman Catholicism, which puts ecclesiology over Scripture.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
Yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms that we're not here to discuss.
But so what really makes them bad? So like I guess one of the themes that I think I'm picking up on is that whenever you start to veer outside of Scripture, right, to come up with your own kind of ideas of how the world is going to end. Like for instance, Mormons have the Book of Mormonism, right?
They
Book of Mormons.
Yeah, they have three. They have the Book of Mormon, the Doctrines and Covenants, and then the Pearl of Great Price, along with the Bible. So they have four technically, but they really don't pay much attention to the Bible. They really don't. So and they believe the Bible is only accurate as well as it can be translated.
Yeah.
So,
and then speaking of translations, Jehovah's Witnesses
have their own translation called the New World Translation, where it's basically the King James translation, but they go in and basically change Scripture, such as the most famous one would be John 1:1, which the Word was God and was with God, and of course in our translations, and all of them say is God.
Yeah.
For New World, is a God, because Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe that Jesus is God. He's a God. They fall into Arianism, which is the belief of is basically he's just the firstborn of creation. He's just like the best creature out there, basically. Which then that leads them to thinking that he's Michael the Archangel. Where, funny enough, Mormons also have a similar one, but they think Adam is Michael the Archangel, which is interesting. But Brigham Young is quoted saying that.
Yeah. So
in teaching that.
Clearly, we got a framework, right? Which is that, we can have that discussion with eschatology as long as we're in the confines of Scripture, the 66 books that was canonized. As long as we're talking about that, right? And not talking about your own translation of how you understand it, and, the fact that you didn't go to Greek and Hebrew school and stuff like that. But as long as we're in those grounds, everything is going to be like, all right, you know what? We can start somewhere together, right? Which is helpful. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put a pin in that conversation,
of course,
because there's obviously so much that we can get into, and I feel like we set the grounds for a good framework for our future discussions, which if you're not already, you should go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Mitch, you also have a blog that you do.
Tell us a little. I do a blog. It's called holyrootholybranches.com. You can find it there. You could also, I'll give you the link for it. You can put it in the description. But also, it's basically, it's a little more topical. At least it's turning to be more topical. I did a little bit of some full exposition. I did a full exposition of Romans 11, so that's on there. And I've done some theological points. I started doing some Hebrews, which of course, very difficult book to do. It's very dense. And then of course, I've done some interesting ones, such as Christmas trees and is Christmas pagan or not. So I did some stuff on that, which I want to do more of, because I have some lovely family members that kind of argue on that point.
Yeah.
So it's but of course it's a conversation to be had, but it's also, to some degree, it's also like, I'm not gonna get into that conversation. It's okay if you don't want to get into it.
Mitch, it's reasonable. It got personal for me.
So, basically,
and obviously,
like you've made it personal.
His book is also going to be in a link in the description.
Yeah.
Mitch, I appreciate you for taking the time out to have this discussion with me. Hopefully you'll be ready for the next one, right? Because I think everybody's going to be ready for that.
I'll be back. Don't worry. I can't stop. It's more like, if you ask anyone who really knows me, who sees me at like church and that kind of stuff, it's like, Mitch can't not talk about it. So
yeah, I find that.
You know that too well.
But I'm gonna see y'all in the next video. Peace.